Well, ladies and gentlemen, in a world shaped by AI, the skills that we rely on today are changing faster than ever. And staying relevant, of course, means constantly upskilling and reskilling. However, of course, that comes with real challenges, not professionally, but also personally as well. Which is why, in our next session, we are going to take a look at how we can balance adaptability with deep expertise and what all of this means for the future of education, for work and well-being. And I'm absolutely delighted to be welcomed by our panel. Very quick introductions. To my left, I have Lameen Abdul-Malik, who is Nobel Peace Laureate and CEO of Honest Management. Wonderful to have you here. Thank you so much. We have Dr. Beth Ahlering, who is here, and she is the Regional Managing Director of the MENA region at Duke Corporation Corporate Education. We also have Dr. Deema Alathel, who is the Executive Director of Global Strategic Initiatives at IBM, followed by Alberto Carvalho Neto, who is the President of JEUNE, which is the Young Entrepreneurs Organization of the European Union. Wonderful to have you here too. And rounding out our panel, we have Naseem Tuffaha, who is the Chief Business Officer for Pearson. So as you can see, a brilliant lineup here to tackle our next dialogue. So, in fact, I wanted to start off with Dr. Deema, if I may, because I was wondering whether you could give us some perspective in terms of how exactly the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is very much responding to the global skills shift. Is there anything that any other countries can be inspired by? What can they learn from? And also, in the age of AI, what skills do you think matter the most?
Absolutely. Thank you, Laura. So the kingdom is undergoing an ambitious transformation, when it comes to upskilling, not just in upskilling overall, but, one of the cornerstones is the Human Capability Development Program. And based on that, we're seeing a national push for agile learning, lifelong learning, credentialing, certification programs, and partnering with global tech giants like IBM in order to establish sustainable educational programs that, that links between the classroom and, the career, the workforce needs in order to ensure that we've got sustainability for the years to come. Now, when we're talking about other markets and other countries around us and what they could learn from this, definitely the lesson that comes to mind is the power of, starting with a clean slate. Because with emerging markets, the advantage that they've got is that they can leapfrog the outdated models and jump directly into tech-led and agile learning ecosystems. We've seen it in the kingdom. We've integrated AI, micro-learning, micro-credentialing, and we've seen upscaling done at scale. And that has been done at a pace which is much faster than most of the developed countries around us that we've seen around. So I think that definitely sets a live use case, for everyone to follow, where you can see that strategy with government backing and a clear direction onto workforce upskilling and how that would work. Now, to address your last point in which you asked what kind of skills do we think that we need, a lot of people think that mostly it's going to be technical skills. However, in my opinion, it goes beyond that. Definitely, you need to have emotional intelligence. You got to have, ethical reasoning, in addition to cultural fluency, in order to navigate, in the new AI world.
And the pace of change here, as you mentioned, really is incredible. And starting off with that clean slate is an advantage. Really interesting. Lameen, over to you. Now, of course, we all know that skill sets always start from education, from when we're young. So when it comes to enhancing skills-based learning, how do you think new skill sets such as AI need to be used? And what do you think sort of scares you the most about implementing AI into our curriculums?
All right, thanks a lot, Laura. First of all, I want to thank all the organizers for this wonderful event. I think it's very important at this time of the world. So just to go back to your question, so when you want to enhance something, you're looking at improving on it. So if you look at the theory of learning, it basically looks at how you learn something, how you know about something, and how you practice that. And in fact, in 2023, there was a report in the US that said any AI or machine learning tool that ignores the theories of learning should actually be rejected. Now, how do we learn? We know that human beings are social beings, so that means that any new technology should enhance our social capabilities, not put us into silos. Also, we also very focused on trust. So we now know things like Gen AI, like ChatGPT, for example, has a hallucination problem. And there's a famous quote that one of my friends said, do not confuse competence with confidence. Basically means that, whenever you put something into Gen AI, it comes out like, yeah, this is the truth. But you need to basically employ critical thinking to think, actually, is this really the truth? Are these statistics correct? Are they biased in a particular way? The other thing about how we learn as well looks at specialized learning. Now, I remember when I was growing up in Nigeria, when I was 5 years old, and I just wanted to draw. I used to love drawing comics. And back then in Nigeria, if you did not, they gave us tests at 5 years old. If you did not pass the test at 5 years old, you basically not move on to the next class. So I actually failed my first class, I'll be honest, I'll just let you know, because I just wanted to draw. And I thought in terms of specialized learning, why wasn't there some kind of tool that would foster what I was interested in? Creating more artists, for example. Does everybody really need to learn algebra, for example? So that's kind of specialized. Now going to some examples. Based on that one of specialized learning, there's actually in South Korea now, they've actually released interactive textbooks. So for example, it basically ties with the student, how they're learning. So if it's taking you 4 weeks to learn algebra, then it takes you 4 weeks. Whereas when we were growing up in school, it was like, algebra is 1 week. If you don't do it in 1 week, tough, you're gonna fail the exam. So in terms of the concept of specialized learning. And then going into that, there's some other examples. Even from the kingdom, there is the Athaka program, which is launched by Saudi, where they want to train 3 million people in AI and programming. And also at King Saud University, they've run an experiment where they've had some kind of generative tutoring, and they've seen a 20% increase in students studying mathematics and also science-based learning. Now, in terms of what scares me the most, I'll give you some statistics. The first one is 67% of secondary school students in the UK admit to using AI for their homework. In the US, it's 43%. Now, Cambridge University, definitely top 5 university in the world, apparently 50% of the students are using Gen AI. And the last one is that apparently more men than women are using Gen AI. Now, what does that tell you? There's some kind of exclusivity here. First of all, gender-based, and also in terms of the global north. So if we're saying we want to introduce something like AI, it should be something that's inclusive, not exclusive. For example, we know, for example, Gen AI uses a lot of energy, whether it's ChatGPT. So that means that in developing countries, they're not going to have the same access to these kind of tools. So what scares me the most is definitely exclusivity. So I'm a little bit worried about that. However, I do have one statistics that was just released recently. I actually made a comment on LinkedIn. It was one of my most liked comments. That's in Saudi, they actually bucked the trend, and there's more women using AI than males. So that's an interesting statistics for Saudi. Now, how can we come out of this? I wanted to advocate for a concept of AI ethics in education. Now, I must confess, it was based on Isaac Narimov, who was one of the guys when robots were created back in the 50s. He came up with these 3 rules, and I basically merged it into AI. So the first rule in AI ethics should be, for example, we should only employ AI if it does not harm a student's learning capabilities, the first one. The second one is that the AI should respond to the teacher's instruction if it does not hamper the student's learning. And the last one for AI ethics in education should be, AI should be functional, but it should not hamper students' learning capability, and it should not go against a teacher's instruction. So that's what I wanted to advocate for AI and ethics.
Thank you so much. That is such a worry, though. We've got all these students using ChatGPT, but it's essentially like cheating on your homework.
Yes.
But I think there was uproar when the calculator first came out, wasn't there?
Yeah.
And people aren't going to be able to do maths anymore because of a calculator, but people use it as a tool, and it's the same concept, essentially, really, isn't it? Dr. Beth, over to you. Really fantastic to have you here. Now, you do a lot of work with lots of different leaders across very diverse markets, navigating rapid disruption as well. How do do policymakers and companies then need to adapt their skill sets, and what is becoming a non-negotiable today for them?
Yeah, thank you so much, Laura. And just to say, it's an absolute privilege to be here. Wonderful topic and panel and set of events that have been organized. We're really pleased to be here. So at Duke Corporate Education, we are active across the Middle East and Asia and globally. And what we're seeing is really that there is a growing skills race that we think will rival the space race of previous generations. And that's affecting all of us who are in the learning provision market and sector, but also it's affecting employers and companies and governments. So just to speak about a few of those in turn, I think what we're seeing from the provision point of view is, to Lameen's point, we're no longer just teaching individuals, we're teaching who will become future adult AI-augmented humans with learning that has also been disrupted and changed through AI. So it's a really different world that we find ourselves living in as educationalists and education providers. And I think there's a lot of adaptation that we have to do and are starting to do to really trial that. I think that the most exciting piece of that is that some of the hypotheses that some of this wouldn't catch on or it would only be deleterious to learning is actually false. And what we're finding is certainly digital native learners are really attracted by and enticed to use these types of tools for learning. So really exciting on that front. On the employer and company front, what we're seeing is that those previous capability frameworks that used to be quite static and changed maybe once every 5 or 10 years are now changing rapidly, almost in 6-monthly increments. And that's a real change just in terms of the rapidity with which we have to meet new needs and reskill and retool. But I'm very hopeful, again, that there will be a positive impact of that and that reskilling will become the new restructuring for this generation of corporations. That is much less disruptive. And then really finally for governments, we're seeing some very interesting practice, including here in the Kingdom, around very thoughtful skills investment. And governments creating the incentives for individuals to continuously upskill. We do a lot of work in Singapore, and it's really amazing there. At every life increment, the government provides an incentive for people to continue to learn, to keep learning, and to keep reskilling. So I think we'll have to think in those ways, and I couldn't agree more with Dr. Deema that we're seeing some of the most amazing growth, but also experiments in this part of the world, the Middle East and Asia, where the market for education is growing phenomenally. So
speaking of upskilling and reskilling, we're going to be talking about the well-being around all of this as well, because it adds so much pressure to people that are so busy anyway in their work life and careers and things. But Alberto, wonderful to have you here. Now, you're the president of JEUNE, as we mentioned earlier, the Young Entrepreneurs Organization of the European Union, and you support around 1.6 million young people that are interested in entrepreneurship. But you're also, in fact, the MD of the Beijing Water Group. So you've got two different perspectives here, one from an institutional standpoint as well as a professional standpoint as well. So how do you think we can best prepare and balance this new skill set needed for the jobs of the future, and how do they differ as well?
So, first of all, the JEUNE is an organization that's born in 1994, so it's one of the biggest organizations of the European Union. And of course, we aim to provide also the discussions of everything that is related to entrepreneurship, from the education level till the end. AI is one of our task force, so it's one of the most important task force that also combine with the social environment and also education. As a BWG, marketing developer, and also CEO of some of the companies from the group, we are a group that is specialized in circular economy, but mostly on the water recycle. So everything is water recycle. On that case, we also use the maximum of the technology, and if we think about the water sector, it was a very basic sector 10, 20 years ago. We started with the meters, then we start with the smart meters, and nowadays, of course, we go to improve on technologies to get more data or much more efficient that goes from the energy sector till the end users. So we need to be, of course, understanding that the tools are amazing, but we need to be very careful on using that. So not as a judge, but also mostly on the tools. We have lots of cases that sometimes providing the wrong data even us as human beings can be complicated to go back and to disinform again, nowadays we have lots of fake news. And now imagine when we are giving the program wrong information. So that is something that we and JEUNE, we are trying to speak more loud, most of the European Union Parliament, to give this information to people be aware on the way that we need to always be with the human being, mostly on the soft skills, because we have, of course, the cultural things, we have many things to judge, and there are many cases that we already saw mistakes. So we are here also to try to get that perception that we need to give always the best for the human being to become the best version of themselves, using the tools with the most efficient way.
Really impressive to see what you're doing. Over to Naseem. I'd really love to get your perspective. You're Chief Business Officer for Pearson. What is your view then on the global skills shift, and how can we close this learn to earn gap?
Yeah, thanks, Laura. That's an incredibly important question. If we think about what's at stake here, there is over $1 trillion that is lost around the world every year in this learn to earn gap. At Pearson, we actually studied 3 transition points where people are getting new jobs. One is from work to school, the second one where there's a job displacement, and the third one when there is automation that is creating a kind of job replacement. And so when we think about the opportunity to reduce this amount of economic loss, if we can just shorten this average transition time, for example, from 24 weeks to 18 weeks, then there's over $100 billion around the world of economic value that can be recaptured. So there's tremendous opportunity, and that really will take a kind of shared interest between public and private institutions. Now, to do so, we need to shift our mindset a little bit because we often talk about, for example, career paths and career ladders. And it's very important in this day and age to really, instead of just thinking about a defined linear career path, to think about skills pathways. We should be thinking about skills paths. And these skills paths are much more dynamic. They're constantly evolving. And so with that, we need to, number one, have a kind of framework that's very dynamic. Sometimes these job categories, as was said, become outdated incredibly quickly. And so we need to have a dynamic nature to how we understand the skills that are in need at a given time. That can be done, in fact, by leveraging AI, by looking at job descriptions on this very day to get a very dynamic sense of what the needs are. And that means we also need to adapt our curriculum in a much more dynamic way. It means we need to adapt the kinds of modes for learning. Adults will learn maybe at night while they're working or while they're not working. It's not always under the constraint of formal institutions. So the way that we think about reskilling and the kinds of reskilling that we need to do have to evolve very quickly. So instead of thinking about, for example, a career ladder that is very defined, that people try to climb, we should be thinking about a different kind of model, one that has multiple exit points, one that has multiple entry points, more like a web rather than a singular ladder. So it will really require a mind shift for all of us and a real focus on skills that are much more dynamic at their core.
Really, really interesting you said that, because that leads me perfectly back to Dr. Deema, because I wanted to get your take on how do we deal with the pressure of this all. As we mentioned earlier, people have got a lot on their plates, and we're constantly upskilling and reskilling anyway, and then suddenly you throw AI and this new era of disruption. How on earth are we meant to manage all of this?
Absolutely. I mean, that puts a large psychological toll on anyone, not just in AI, in any, in any industry, but let alone when you're talking about AI and emerging technologies, that multiplies it 10 times even worse. So I think it starts by redefining the narrative, from fear of irrelevance to empowerment through adaptability. So when One is trying to upskill themselves. They are redefining who they are, and that's, again, in relevance to what Naseem has just mentioned. So I believe that employers should start focusing on not just providing the content, but providing like coaching and support groups and psychological reforms within the work environment in order to enable those individuals within the workforce to provide the upskilling needed and the environment needed for them to flourish. So again, it goes back to redefining the narrative in everyone's mind.
Very well said. Lameen, I don't know whether you wanted to add to that, because I have a bit of a different question for you, but if you wanted to add to that, please do. But I'd be interested to know, as the job market is constantly changing, is there one subject that you would add to the modern curriculum today? What would it be?
Yeah, I'll probably advocate for, based on what Naseem was saying, what I call entrepreneurship mindset. But what I mean by that is I think that it doesn't mean that everybody should become an entrepreneur, but in terms of what I mean by a mindset is looking at how do you link what you want to do to your purpose in life. I think we're trying to move away from the concept of just start a career and it's divorced from what really matters to you in your life. So I shared with you earlier on that a few years ago I had a pause in my UN career and moved to Cape Town and opened up a coffee shop for about 3 years. As a way to get out of my system, but I'm still learning, even though that was like about almost 15 years ago, I'm still learning from that experience. In fact, I've even designed a course on that experience, but the idea was like, what's entrepreneurship mind teach you? It teaches you a lot of self-awareness as well, and it also teaches you about how to interact with the people around you, because we don't exist in a vacuum. So if you think about entrepreneurship mindset, you're thinking about what are the skill sets that I need? I need soft skills because I need to interact with different people. I need hard skills because I need to do the job. But I need to develop self-awareness about what do I really love. When people come sometimes and ask me, can you give me some career advice? I say to them, what did you love before you were 10 years old? And they always look at me and think, that's strange. I was like, yeah, because you should always keep that fire burning with you in some way or the other. So even when I had my coffee and cake shop, I always used to bake on the weekends, and I've been writing about coffee for about 18 years now. That's my hobby. But just that concept of linking your purpose to what you want to do in life and have an impact, I think it also creates that kind of concept about being entrepreneurship and thinking to help yourself develop self-awareness and also look at how you can support other people around you.
Very brave of you to branch off into something so incredibly different. That's absolutely amazing. Really inspiring, in fact. Dr. Beth, back over to you. Sadly, we are running out of time. But what do you believe is on the horizon for the future of skills in the age of AI and reskilling? And where globally do you see the different kinds of countries with the most compelling types of reskilling models? Is there anything you can share with us?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the question. It's a really interesting time, and certainly in our work in executive education, we're just seeing this new era, I would call it, where people have learned the technical skills. We went through a whole era of soft skills development, and I think we're entering a new pioneering phase of thinking what's next. And part of that is absolutely understanding the technology trends and how that's going to change. But the other part of it is much more psychological, and I think that's the other pioneering terrain, certainly in leadership development, but beyond soft skills that we need to start introducing at a much younger age throughout the lifelong learning landscape. So I think it's a very exciting time to really see how that comes together and partner that also with the efficiency of AI and effectiveness of teaching. I'm always reminded as well of the 20% of learners globally who don't react or learn well in a traditional classroom environment. So I think we have a lot to learn and a lot to offer from the changes that we're seeing.
Definitely. Thank you so much. Alberto, over to you. We spoke about entrepreneurship. We've heard, an entrepreneurial mindset, is actually quite a good thing in all of this. So how do we make sure that the right talent is in place in order to lead AI and to make sure that people are always in control? It's very much a tool, and that's how it's got to sort of stay going forward.
So I believe that we should keep investing in human capability and humanity. If we put that as a leadership, will also help us to make the best decisions, because we need to keep improving, like already the panel discussed a little bit about the soft skills, and keep investing on training and giving the right tools. I think that is the key words. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And yes, back to Naseem, most workers, they're not prepared at all for this skills shift at the end of the day. No one's really that prepared. So how do we build a future-ready workforce? And is it, do you think, a one-size-fits-all approach?
It's a great question. I think we've all seen with the pace of change, it is incredibly difficult to predict the future. A year from now, never mind 5 years from now. And so if I were to say, what is the most important thing? I think the fundamental skill is learning how to learn. In a world where we can't predict the future, learning how to learn becomes the most essential thing. There was a great quote, and it kind of takes a little bit to internalize, but we often think of, we learn to work. But really now the work is learning. That is the fundamental thing that we do. But when we think about how are we taught how to learn, at the core, it is a very meta-cognitive thing. So for example, we're taught regulation of our emotions when we think about soft skills. We mention that frequently. Since I've arrived in the kingdom, I've had to regulate the amount of food that I eat. It's so delicious. With a plate of kebsa, I have to regulate my consumption because I understand the impact of food and exercise on health. But what about the regulation, our own self-regulation around learning? We learn about our emotions, we learn about our bodies and our health, but how about the time to learn about our brains, each of us, and how we can best learn, and really investing in that. For example, with a difficult task, because we often learn best by doing, well, persisting through a difficult task reflects a metacognitive aspect to our learning. But if we look at our primary and secondary education systems, these are not built in. So we're often trying to do it with adults, often in a corporate environment. And so we need to think holistically about this concept of learning how to learn. And that is a shared responsibility. It's a responsibility for governments, it's a responsibility for educators, it's a responsibility for employers, but I think ultimately it's a responsibility for each of us to consciously think about how we learn, how we can best learn. And I'd say maybe the final message to all of us as leaders here in this audience is we have an opportunity to role model this behavior, to be the best learners that we can be. And so when we talk about the impact of AI, we should all, for example, ask us, how have we utilized AI today to improve ourselves and improve the way that we're learning? Ultimately, that can set the tone for the kind of change that we're seeking to implement across the kingdom and really across the world.
Very well said, and I think that's the perfect way to end for our session, because sadly we have run out of time, but we cannot thank you enough for sharing with us here today. What an interesting conversation. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, let's hear it for our panel. Thank you.